August, of course. I just want to. There was, of course, a minor election on the other side of the pond um, that we followed with some considerable interest as well. What did we make of that? That was a pretty spectacular result. It didn't really defy the odds. I think as we got to the end of it, Trump was the odds-on favourite. I've wasted a lot of recent time going through YouTube videos just showing the complete meltdown of lefties covering the election campaign in absolute denial. I mean, we were saying earlier that perhaps there was a certain degree of misplaced optimism amongst Conservative campaigners in the election, which may be melted away by July the 4th. Not for the presenters of MSNBC or CNN was there any compromise with unfolding reality whatsoever. It's hilarious to watch that even when it's completely evident that Trump had won. I was glad I put my neck on the line at our election night party here in South London. Had a great gathering to watch the unfolding events, but it was pretty damn obvious that Trump had won pretty early, that he won, every one of the 7 swing states. Had a pretty punchy performance even in places like New York. Okay, didn't won the popular vote. That was odds against. Didn't win it massively, but nevertheless won it. What do we make of the election result and the incoming returning President Trump? And Annunziata, I'll start with you.
I also was watching the results come in and consistently thinking, he can't be winning, he can't be winning, he can't be winning, because every media outlet had told me he couldn't. The entire blob of media had said Trump can't win. And he did. And yes, the betting markets were on the money, as they so often are. But only 2 days before, I think it might have been 3, we had the poll from Iowa that told us Harris was going to win Iowa. They were wrong. It was all based on what they wanted to happen, not what was likely to happen.
Yeah.
But that didn't change the fact that if you follow US news, that's what you were hearing. And that must have been what the people in the US were hearing. The US elector must have been hearing constantly that Kamala Harris is going to win. Well, she was completely unelectable. I think one of the funniest moments of this month, to jump ahead, is Jill Biden's takedown of Kamala Harris. And if you haven't watched it, please do. But where she says, we just need joy.
Yeah.
Joy.
Well, if you just need joy, watch the same YouTube videos that I've been watching of the complete meltdown of Rachel Maddow and Anderson Cooper and everybody else as reality bites them ever more firmly on the backside as the night unfolds. Its best comment is comedy gold.
They just couldn't accept the idea. But that's similar to here, that there is from the woke left a complete misunderstanding, purposeful in my view, of people who want controls on immigration, who want lower taxes, who want a smaller state, who are, in all the terms we might use, small c conservative. That if you believe in the family, the community, but also freedom and responsibility, then they think you're evil.
Yeah.
And they don't think evil can win because they are the people who are good, the people who are nice. And it's just not true. And I think the Trump victory demonstrated that the majority of people do want small c conservative policies, and not just in America, but far more broadly. And we can look at Canada, we can look at Millet. There is a serious movement for sensible, real conservatism.
Yeah. This might be true. Sam, what was your take on it? Look, despite the fact that I'm proudly wearing a MAGA baseball cap, I've got some concerns about Donald Trump, right? I mean, I definitely wanted him to win, but you know, I'm not all in for, you know, a tariff trade war, for crying out loud. So there are some downsides as well. But reflections on Trump, but also, and I think you've shared with me, Sam, that you've got a similar hobby of watching complete meltdowns on YouTube of lefties being confronted with unfolding reality. It really is joy. It's glorious to watch. What's your take on Trump? And I mean, it seems to me, I can understand why a pro-Harris TV station over the course of the election would be pumping her up and saying how joyous and wonderful she was. But, you know, once the votes are coming in, why delude yourself about what the result is? It's completely mad.
I mean, I think I can actually, I'll see if I can find it and send it to you if you've not seen it already. There's one that's possibly even better because than the mainstream media. It's a podcast somewhere in New York. They're doing a live election show, and they spend the whole night saying, until I think quite late in the day, basically saying, "Well, we don't understand why they haven't called this race for Harris yet. Why are they still that?" And they literally believe that the mainstream media are being too even-handed by not calling the race for Harris earlier in the night. It's honestly quite mind-boggling to see. On the I think the 2022 election, being 2020 and 2022 elections, had kind of messed with a lot of pundits' heads. You know, the
red mirage thing, the
red
early
mirage,
votes look like it's going well for the Republicans, but then they come unstuck, right? Yeah,
exactly. I think that messed with people's heads a lot. And I mean, it was. I haven't quite got my finger yet on whether or not, you know, places like Philadelphia, there wasn't as much vote there as they thought there was later in the night, or if they didn't get the massive majorities that they usually get. But there was a lot of vote outstanding. I remember, you know, in Pennsylvania, there was a lot of vote outstanding in places like Philadelphia. There was a lot of vote outstanding in Atlanta very late in the night. So I'm a bit more generous to them than you are. That I can kind of see why you might hold on to the idea that this whole red mirage thing is still in play. But the idea that they didn't they don't seem to have mentally come to terms with the idea that there were a lot more Republican absentee voters, so that it was almost baked in that there wouldn't be such a massive shift as there was in 2020. But I don't quite understand why I can kind of understand. You know,
anyway, putting aside the media, Sam, I mean, you know, Trump 2.0. How much winning is there going to be? There's going to be so much winning. Is there
so much winning? Too much
winning. You know,
you're going to be saying, Mr. President,
to stop the winning, please, Mr. President.
I'll be honest. I probably, had I been an American primary voter, I wouldn't have voted for Donald Trump. I would have voted for Ron DeSantis. I think he's probably, you know, for all of his personal shortcomings, which I think were made clear in the primary campaign, I think he had a much better policy platform that would actually be good for America. Some of Donald Trump's nominations have been a bit weird, although I can kind of understand that he's trying to bring people in from outside of the Westminster swamp.
The Washington swamp.
Sorry, Washington swamp. I'm sorry.
Sorry, Washington swamp's even worse than the Westminster swamp.
It is. I've lived there, and yes, it is very swampy, especially in high summer. But I mean, I think it's going to be a good 4 years. I do. I think that, you know, in areas around tax and areas around trying deregulation, areas pushing back against some of the more bonkers social policy. I do think it's going to be a good 4 years, and I mean the markets certainly seem to think so.
I've got a lot of hope for Musk and Ramaswamy on getting rid of government waste. I hope that works. Andrew, what was your take? You joined us on Lavender Hill to see the events unfold. What did you make of it, and what do you think happens next in the States?
Well, I wasn't in the least bit surprised that that Trump. Well, I always knew that was possible, but you know, go woke, go broke, Mark. It's obvious what the concerns are of the average American voter. They were much better off economically under the 4 years of Trump, and the last 4 years have not been very good. Perhaps, the Democrats should have learned from Bill Clinton. It's the economy, stupid. But they didn't seem to learn that lesson at all. Instead, they start going on all the woke issues. It was about immigration. I mean, I spoke for a popcorn podcast earlier this week to Ross Thompson, former Conservative MP, who was out in Florida campaigning for Trump and for Senator Rick Scott. Immigration, big issue, not really addressed by the Democrats. So none of these things were particularly surprising. I mean, as to the reactions of some of the people that you see on YouTube, well, they're hilarious. They're saying that you're responsible for this if you voted for Trump. I hope that you die a painful death and burn in the fires of hell. And then #be kind.
Yeah.
I mean, the reaction has just been completely over the top. I think that will settle down. But there's one thing that I have noticed is that right from day one, since the election, Trump has not behaved as the president-elect. He has behaved as the president of the United States. Mm-hmm. All the big announcements that he's doing, even turning up in Paris to attend the reopening of Notre Dame Cathedral. He was the main highlight of any leader there. I mean, Jill Biden went across there, didn't she, representing her husband. But he is basically, even though he hasn't been inaugurated president, he really is effectively the president, and he is calling all the shots. So I'm not a particularly big Trump fan, but yeah, I would have voted for him because Kamala Harris was completely unsuitable. And that sort of concession speech that she eventually gave, I think it took her about 12 hours or so to give.
24 hours, I think.
24, yeah. It took a long time, didn't it, for her to give that speech? But she starts talking about, a million stars, bright, it's shining brightly in the sky, and all this total
nonsense. Do you want any mayo with that massive bowl of word salad?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, she just proved how unsuitable she is.
Right, well, let's wrap up the year in December, as we're rapidly approaching Christmas. I guess rather than focusing on very recent events, I'm going to ask each of you to give a little bit of an audit of the Labour government's performance so far. They've obviously been in office since July. Perhaps a little bit of a take on Kemi Badenoch's reign so far. She's now been in for a number of weeks. I mean, but it might be difficult to judge. But we've seen her a few times at PMQs and in her new role. And I'm going to ask each of you. We have one of our other colleagues suggest some questions as well, which is who's been your biggest political hero and political flop of 2024. The other question he suggested that we asked was where on earth does Mark Littlewood get his shirts from? Well, that is a complete secret. I've got to tell you, getting shirts like this is even harder than getting Mel Stride merchandise. I'll tell you that. Even rarer, even more difficult. Annunziata, let me start with you. So, quick audit of Labour so far, Kemi so far, and your hero and jackass of 2024.
Well, I think if anything makes a mockery of our democracy, it's the number of lies Labour told people specifically before the election that they have gone back on. That's not just farmers, but pensioners. It's basically every single voter is affected. We will not tax working people. And what have they done? Put huge tax burden on everyone who works. Fine, it's meant to be borne by the businesses, but it's already leading to less recruitment, fewer jobs.
Taxes can't be paid by businesses. They can only be paid by human beings.
Absolutely right. They cannot. They are paid by individuals. And inevitably, all the costs are passed on to each and every one of us. I think there has been not a single highlight of Labour so far. I don't think they could have started off worse. I thought they'd be bad, and they're worse than I could have possibly imagined. It is a vindictive socialist government that is set on destroying this country, not just economically, but physically, as we now know about building all over the Green Belt.
We're going to disagree on that, I think. Yeah. I'm
I
very pro concrete.
I'm sure you are, and I completely understand the arguments behind that. But actually, I think one of the biggest selling points of our country is that we don't have the trailing ribbon developments that so many other countries.
And actually, we've got to, I'm being a bit flippant, we've got to do it consensually as well. I think this sort of central
Local
planning
democracy
imposition.
does matter enormously to me. That what is the point in electing your local councillor if what they represent you for is completely trodden over?
Yeah.
I think Labour has been appalling.
Okay, Kemi.
It's very clear that everyone has been disappointed, even people who voted for them.
All right, we got the audit. Move on to Kemi.
On Kemi, well, I'm not sure I've really seen her yet. PMQs has been rather underwhelming to me. I think there are so many targets to hit that haven't been hit. I understand when she says, I want to formulate good policy, strong policy. I think that's very sensible. And I think we do have to learn from Labour that you take the opportunity of opposition to actually know what you're going to do when you get there. I think it's been very clear that Labour, despite 14 years in opposition, had no idea what they were planning on doing when they were actually elected, or how the maths worked, or any of it. I think she's right in that respect, but I also think that all of us, every single person on the right of politics, particularly those within the Conservative Party, do need some flesh on those bones. We need to know what we will be fighting for in May. It's not very long away when the county councils and mayors are up for election across the country. And I'll be fighting locally. But at the moment, we don't know what the national platform will be.
Yeah.
And I think she really needs to fill that void.
Get on with that. So who's your hero and villain of 2024?
My villain is Rachel from accounts, who I think can neither do maths. This is obviously our Chancellor, Rachel Reeves. She can't do maths, but she also has an incredibly vindictive element to her that wants to smash success. And as I said, I thought Labour would be bad. She has made it an awful lot worse. Her budget was truly awful. And we can see that in business confidence. We can see it in inward investment. The country is going to shrink. All down to her. My hero is probably Robert Jenrick, who, despite losing, still is fighting the cause of the right, the things we believe in, and is being probably the most vocal member of the shadow cabinet. And I think it would have been very easy to have felt sour grapes about losing.
Yeah, and this man doesn't take any time off, from what I can gather.
He seems to work at every hour of the day. I think he's really fighting the cause for conservatism.
Great roundup. Andrew, let me go to you next. So thoughts on Labour's performance so far, thoughts on Kemi's performance so far, and a hero and a villain.
Right, I'll keep this brief. I mean, I knew Labour would be bad, but I couldn't quite believe just how bad they were so early. I couldn't believe just how quickly they've tanked in the polls. I mean, it is incredible. I mean, it is only 5 months into this particular government, and you think they were having midterm blues here. So it particularly bad. Kemi, well, I didn't vote for her, but of course I support her as the leader. I think we need more action this day from her rather than promises of change tomorrow. She cannot go on for the next 2 or 3 years trying to work out what went wrong, have this huge post-mortem, come up with some fantastic new policies, not when you've got reform breathing over your shoulder. I think she's got to move forward a lot more quickly. People have mentioned Margaret Thatcher took a long time to settle in as leader of the opposition. She did, but she had the time. Kemi really doesn't have the time. As far as the villain is concerned, well, I would have gone for Rachel from accounts as well. So it's a bit of a toss-up between Keir Starmer and this other person who I am going to give it to, which is Ed Miliband. I mean, this is a man who just wants us all to have more expensive energy bills. I mean, everything's just a pipe dream that he's pushing forward, and it's all starting to unravel. Labour's not going to give us cheaper energy. He's even admitted that. I think he admitted that earlier today. So I'm going to go for Ed Miliband because he's doing more huge damage to the economy as well. As for my hero, I've been thinking about this, and I'm actually going to go for David Starkey, because he's made a real intellectual case for a restoration in this country of rolling back the Blairite reforms that the Conservative Party has just stuck to ever since the days of Tony Blair. He's done that. He's convinced Robert Jenrick of that. Robert's listened to him a lot. We've listened to him a lot, and this is well, Popcorn would not be exactly what it is today unless it was for David Starkey. So maybe that's a little parochial, but certainly he's the person who I think has had the most influence on me intellectually this year, and I will put him as my hero.
Very solid choice. Sam, Labour, Kenny, hero, villain.
Okay, so on Labour, while I obviously agree with everything that everybody else said about how bad Labour has been, I would say that there are a couple of potential, longer term bright spots. First of which is Wes Streeting's health. I think he could, although he's started to make a few small steps in the direction of actually coming to grips with this utter catastrophe that's the National Health Service. And to disagree with Annunziata, planning reforms. I think planning reforms are well overdue, and I think it's more important to have enough housing for people to be able to afford than local councillors to sort of be more local people to be represented. That's just my personal view. On Kemi, I've kind of already given a bit of a feedback on her. I mean, in talking about the leadership campaign, I don't think she's put nearly enough meat on the bones of the of what happens next. I hope she'll do well. I'm backing her 100% as the leader of the party. And the most important thing is that we, as far as possible, do give her time to bed in, because if we try and force if we try and get in and force things too quickly, and we're just going to end up in the same rats in a sack situation that party's been for the last few years. Unfortunately, I'm in a bit of trouble with as far as villain and heroes go, because my first pick was Rachel Reeves, my second pick was Ed Miliband. So I'm actually
doing
going
you
to
all
go
a
for
favour
Starmer.
by going last. I'm running out of all sorts of options. Yeah.
So I'm actually going to be a little bit. I'm going to be a little bit cheeky, and I'm going to say, actually, my villain of the year is Rishi Sunak, because I think that so many of the problems that the country is in today is because of his leadership in the first half of the year. It's nothing against him personally. He's a lovely, lovely man, and I think as a person, I think very highly of him. But as far as the politics is concerned, he is responsible for the date of the election. He is responsible for the state of the Conservative Party, and he is responsible for the election result fundamentally. So I think really I've got to say he's as far as villains of the political year go, he's got to be pretty high up on the list. My hero, I'm looking abroad, and I'm going to say, and I'm probably going to pronounce his name wrong because I'm not a francophone. Pierre Poilievre in Canada, I think, is really showing the direction that I hope Kemi will take around things like planning reform, around taking a robustly conservative leadership in what is traditionally a quite left-wing country. And so if Kemi Badenoch were to replicate a lot of Pierre Poilievre's policies and approach to things, I think she could do very well. And I think there are signs with her engagement with the media and how punchy she is on the stump that she could actually replicate some of that stuff. Just needs the policies.
Okay, interesting roundup. You've not left me with very many options. I mean, I would say, although obviously we're partisans here, but I think it's not too early to pass judgment on the Labour government. What an absolute disaster. And I don't think there's any prospect of recovery, which from an electoral point of view I welcome, but God knows how much more damage they're going to do to the nation before we get an opportunity to remove them. And I think that opportunity is very, very much on the board now. In fact, I think likely, very likely, this will be a one-term government. Sure, something could turn up to save them somehow, but I think it looks increasingly likely with each passing day. On Kemi, I think it is too early to say. I basically like the cut of her jib. I just want to see more of it and a bit more bravery. I'm running out completely of villains of the year. You've stolen all the best ones. I was even thinking of going for Sunak for calling the election too early, but to go with the wider theme, I think David Lammy, deserves more than a shout out. This is, embarrassing, his conduct, and I would have thought if Keir Starmer's got any sense, Lammy will be shuffled out at the first opportunity. He's just completely inappropriate man to be Foreign Secretary in every size, shape or form. My hero of the year, well, this was a difficult one. I think I was initially tempted to go for Adam Armstrong, who scored the winning goal for Southampton in May to get us promoted to the Premier League. But I think I have to accept that's not really a political nomination. So I'm going to go for Javier Milei, the chainsaw-wielding president of Argentina, who's managed to get inflation down to 2%. Still don't really know whether what he's doing will work or whether it would work, but if he's ousted or derailed first. But if you actually want to see someone who has got the clarity and determination to completely turn their country round, I think he out-trumps Trump as an outspoken, direct radical. I think there's much to learn from him, and I hope the leader of the Conservative Party doesn't hold back. I'm not literally suggesting that she should wield a chainsaw above her head, but I think we should start moving in that direction. And just to wrap everything up, give 2024 each of you a rating out of 10, and then tell me on a scale of 1 to 10, how optimistic are you about 2025? So, Andrew, I'll start with you. What was 2024 like out of 10, all in all?
Well, I started working for Popcorn in April, so
that's clear 10.
That's straight. Yes, absolutely. So that's improved. That's improved. Personally, it's a 10 out of 10. Very, very happy at the end of this year. For the country, very, very low, 2 or 3 out of 10. Really. Optimism for next year. I would say pretty much exactly the same. Long term, yeah, I don't think Labour's going to recover from this, but by God, the long term is quite long, isn't it? We're talking about 2029, and God knows how much damage they can do. So I'm not very optimistic for the country.
Sam?
I'm trying to get a sense of the scale, whether or not one means thermonuclear war, or if
Naught means thermonuclear war, I think.
Okay, fair enough.
Well, one is a more minor nuclear tactical strike on a few cities. Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna go. I think 3 is probably. It's pretty dire out there. It's probably not as bad as thermonuclear war, I admit, but
yeah, it is not as bad as thermonuclear war.
Yeah, and frankly, I think things are going to get worse before they get better. So actually, let me rephrase it. I think I'm going to go for a 4 for this year and a 3 for next year. So I just think things are going to get worse.
That's about the same trajectory that the economy's on under the Labour government then, yeah.
Well, and the Conservative Party's poll rankings before the election.
Annunziata.
Sam, you literally just took the words out of my mouth. I was going to go for 4 for this year on the grounds that I have to have some way to fall for next year. This Labour government is set on destroying our country, and there's nothing we can do about it in the next 12 months. There won't be an election. We can't kick them out, and they are hell-bent on destroying every aspect of our country that I've seen them speak about so far. So yeah, I'm going to have to agree with Sam, 4 for this year, but I'll go for 2 for next.
Yeah, I think this year, if we were only to look at the UK, has been pretty bleak, but I think the fight back's beginning. So I'm going to be a little bit higher. I think I'll give it a 5, but that's more about international developments in Canada, America, Argentina. And I think that the beginning of the fight back's happening here. But I agree with you, next year is going to be grimmer, certainly for the UK, if not for the rest of the world. So I was going to go for 5 this year, 4 next year. But looking at the wider picture, I think I have to round that 4 down to a 3, because it now looks certain that Southampton FC will be relegated. So that knocks a point off for 2025, rounds it down to a 3. Guys, it's been great working with you over the course of 2024. Look forward to working with you over the course of 2025. Thanks very much for all of your reflections. Thanks everybody who's been listening. Thanks to all of you out there who have helped Popcorn over its first now nearly 12 months of life. As Peter Mandelson was fond of saying, much done, much left to do. Have a very Merry Christmas, and we'll be back in the new year. Take care all. Over and out.
Happy Christmas.